What's up everyone, I'm SigmaTech72 and welcome to my mod spotlight for Edmontonia added by Additions Ascended Edmontonia by Garuga123. Before we get into this, I do want to mention that this is a freemium mod, so I've put the full limitations on the screen and they're also on the mod page, but just in short, know that if you don't own the mod, you'll still be able to join servers that do have the mod installed, but you just won't be able to really access any of the mod's features. Let's talk about where you can find Edmontonia. I've attempted to highlight roughly the spots where they spawn on each map with some sick drawing skills and questionable color choices, but hopefully it's enough to get the point across. Starting with the island, you'll be able to find them in the redwoods, which are of course in that middle part of the map. You'll be able to find them in the mountains, which are largely in the north. You can also find them in the grasslands. I've not actually highlighted them because they're just kind of so sporadic, and I wouldn't actually recommend looking for them on this map anyway in the grasslands, because if I was on the island, I'd be searching the redwoods and mountains anyway. Next, we've got Scorched Earth. They can be found in what's called the Green Desert, which are kind of the lusher parts on the interior of the map. And the mod page also mentions being able to find them in the dunes, which is of course just that whole border of the map. Now the center isn't actually mentioned on the mod page, but just based on some of the Discord messages, it does sound like they do spawn there, and I'm going to assume it's the same biomes as the island. So the grassland and the mountains are kind of randomly through those central three islands, and also the huge floating island in the west, which really should have been in the center, but who am I to judge? And then you're also able to find them in the redwoods, which are of course kind of along the southern edge of the map. Finally, we've got Extinction. So these spawn in the desert biodome in the lower right of the map, and the sulfur fields in the lower left. So if you're on Extinction, just basically look across the lower half of the map and you'll be able to find some. I'll also just briefly end this with a little bit of speculation. So based on the biomes that you're able to currently find Edmontonia in, these are kind of my predictions for which maps they may appear on whenever these are released. So these all have either redwoods, mountains, grasslands, and or dunes, so there's a pretty high chance Edmontonia will spawn in them when they release. Alright, so let's talk about how to tame the Edmontonia. So actually to start, it does need a saddle to be ridden. So it actually comes with two saddles. So if I search Edmontonia, you can see we get a more primitive saddle at level 60, which is crafted in the smithy. It costs 150 fiber, 30 keratin, 300 hide, and 75 metal ingots. And then there's a more advanced flamethrower saddle, which you unlock at level 70. This one's crafted in the fabricator. It costs 100 cementing paste, 250 fiber, 30 keratin, 150 polymer, 30 electronics, 350 hide, 100 metal ingots, and 20 sulfur. So I've gone ahead and crafted these, so we'll go ahead and grab the primitive saddle out of the smithy, and we'll talk about the flamethrower saddle a little later. So what do you actually need to tame them? So to initiate the taming, we are going to need a torch. To perform the actual taming process, we can either keep using the torch, or we can use a crossbow with flame arrows, which this can also be a bow or a compound bow, or just a flamethrower. So I'm going to use the crossbow because this one is a little bit more easily accessible. And then we'll also need sweet veggie cakes. So I'm just going to grab 20, and let's grab 200 flame arrows. And then we'll also want to make sure that these are equipped to our crossbow, because I think it's just on primitive. Yep. Okay, sweet. Then with that, we should be ready to go out and find an Edmontonia to tame. Okay, so we've got a 150. He looks like he's a little stuck in the wall. Okay, there he is. It looks like he's fixing himself. So what you want to do once you find an Edmontonia is you basically need to follow it for a little bit, because we're waiting for it to sneeze some spark powder onto the ground. Oh, okay, there he goes. So he scratches his nose and then he sneezes. So you can see he leaves behind a bit of spark powder. You can see it's got a prompt, so let's go ahead and take the torch out. And then if you wait, he'll start looking towards us. And you actually see it does not let you ignite it until he's looking at you. And boom, we ignited it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I need to go ahead and put the veggie cakes on my hotbar. So at this point, he is following you. So like if I go, oh, okay, well, we're starting. So the key to taming is you need to kill the creatures that he spawns. So let me see if I can get a good hit. I can't get a good hit from any. There we go. Okay. So You have to kill the creatures he summons with fire. I would recommend waiting until he has fully stacked them up with powder, because it deals more damage, which means they go down quicker. So you can actually see he'll follow me around a little bit better now. Yep. So he'll do a little, yep, you can see right there. So that's his animation he does whenever he summons something. It looks like it is back over here. Oh, it's a Rex. So what we're going to do, we're going to wait for it to fully stack up all the powder stacks before we do anything, because that just maximizes the damage and the chances that it will die due to fire. There we go. So it exploded, and now it's dealing damage. I'm just going to help it a little bit by hitting a couple more times. There we go. Okay, so it died, and you can see we do have taming progress. What you want to do now is go up and feed it sweet veggie cake, because that will heal it. The Edmontonia is going to take damage as the creatures attack it, so you want to make sure you keep it topped up. We're just kind of waiting for the next one, and just kind of rinse and repeat from here. Oh, okay, looks like it's a Serrato this time. The one good thing I do like is these are marked, so you can actually see the difference between wild creatures and then between the creatures it summons. So let's wait for it to fully tick up. Boom. So it is dying to fire, and it has died. So you can see now we've got some more taming effectiveness. The only time you really lose effectiveness is if you don't kill something to fire. Don't worry about accidentally hitting it, it doesn't affect it at all. Okay, sweet. You're definitely going to need some healing. Okay, sweet. The other thing to note with the veggie cakes is they don't have the normal cooldown. They just give a flat health boost, so you can actually feed it a couple times, which is what I just did until it tops up. Looks like we're going to end it with a Rex. We'll take it. So let's let the powder build up. There we go. Alright, well, I've learned my lessons from last time. Let's hit it a couple more. Sweet. And we've tamed it. So that's really it. So if you look on the left side of the screen, we do have the controls for all the attacks, and then on the bottom we've got a couple notes about some of the attacks and abilities. One immediate thing that I do want to note is the movement. So if you look, we actually do turn in place. So I'm not pressing any forward keys, but it does just let me turn. You can also strafe, which is pretty awesome. So you can see I'm just pressing the left and right keys, and we're just kind of strafing around. As we're kind of looking around for stuff to fight, I do want to bring up that there are some passive abilities Edmontonia has. So to start, it takes less damage from fire and explosion damage. It does damage reflection similar to the Kentro. So normal creatures, it will return 25% of the damage it takes, and then also for bosses it returns 10% of the damage. It does have weight reduction, so it's got a 50% weight reduction to stone, flint, spark powder, obsidian, and crystal, and then it's got a whopping 75% weight reduction on metal, so very similar to the Anki, but has some additional reductions. I'm really not seeing anything good, so I guess what we'll start with the bite. So the bite is the lowest damage, but it harvests a crap ton of berries. We go up to a tree and I press C. You can see just barely it does harvest charcoal from trees, which is great. So it mainly does thatch, but it gets a little bit of wood, but the charcoal is kind of the cool thing with it. So if I look, so there's about 3 or 4 trees, we got 20 charcoal. Not great return, but I mean, anything's better than nothing, to be fair. So if we press left click, you can see that we're just kind of thrusting our spikes forward. There's not really a better description. It does do damage, so if we do this does also harvest a little bit of berries, but it's not anywhere. Oh, well, if I can find a berry bush, I guess. There we go. Yeah, so it does harvest a little bit of berries, but nowhere near as good as the C attack. The other benefit is that this does harvest rocks. You can see it primarily harvests flint, but we also get spark powder. So you can see we just harvest 2 rocks, and it does it very well. So let me just drop these berries real quick. So that was 2 rocks, and we got roughly almost 600 spark powder, almost 2 full rows of flint. I'm not counting that. And I mean a little bit of stone. So this is very much like an ankylosaur harvesting rates. The other thing as well is that this left click attack also harvests metal. and at a pretty good rate. So that was almost a full 1,000, which I do have increased gather rates, but I mean, this is still pretty good. This is definitely an upgrade over the Anki, like at a bare minimum. And like I mentioned earlier, you can see it weighs 300 in my inventory and only 75 in its inventory. Same thing for flint, weighs 2.5 pounds, where it normally weighs 5. Stone weighs about 50 pounds and only weighs about 25 pounds. So like I said, a lot of good weight reductions on these metal materials. Alright, so let's get into the actual cool abilities, which to be fair, I do like the harvesting, but let's say the more flashy abilities. So left click will apply that powder debuff, and this can be toggled on and off because it does cost spark powder to actually use this. So if we press left control and left click, you can see down there in the lower right, it does turn off, whereas if I click left control and left click again, it turns on. And this does have a visual cue on the Edmontonia, so if I do click it, you can see that it's off and its spikes don't have that powder effect, but when I turn it on, they do. So very cool visual. We've got it on, so what can we do with it? You can see we do start applying those bombs. So those bombs increase the amount of fire damage that a creature takes, and we just have to ignite it. In this case, we'll just hit right click. And we'll do it again to this terror bird, which has decided to... Oh, what? Did I not hit it? Oh, well, I think I killed it. It costs 10 spark powder to apply each one of those individual debuffs, and the more debuffs you had, the more damage it's going to take from fire attacks. You just need a way to ignite it, which this can be done with a flame crossbow, so maybe if I... Okay, it's going to run away. It's not the fastest, so we'll just shoot it real quick, if I can. Oh, well, it went away. Let's apply it real quick. Alright, and then let's shoot it. And you can see it ignites, which is great. So that was awesome. The powder sacks, like I said, increase the amount of fire damage that a creature will take. You just have to ignite it. You can ignite it either with a flame weapon or with its right click like this, which is that tail whip. The cool thing to note is that fire damage increase does scale with Edmontonia's melee. So let's start applying it. So you can see it only has 2 because it's much smaller than a Paraceratherium. Then we'll just right click. Oh, maybe if I could hit it. Let's do it again. And boom. It never gets old. Alright, let's start stacking. 1, 3, 4, and then boom. Oh, Pego. Good. So the last attack that we can do with the primitive saddle is we can start laying a dust cloud. So the way we enable that is with control and right click. You can see it turns on in the bottom right there. Now each one of these is going to start laying a bunch of clouds. So if I look real quick, you can see them. The thing to note with the clouds is that it costs 50 spark powder for each one. So you will go through spark powder like nobody's business. But what we can do then is ignite it and they do a chain reaction. So any creature that walks through them gets a powder debuff. So let me see if I can quickly cut off this Lystro before it walks through. Yeah, you can see right there. So it applied this powder debuff, and then we can just ignite it. It's so great. Oh, and you can see actually, you know, I've completely depleted my spark powder with all that. And then you can also ignite it with a fire weapon if I can do it quick enough. There we go. So that was the primitive saddle. Let's check out the flamethrower saddle. So the thing to note with this is it is multi-seated saddle, so you actually have 2 passengers. They each sit on a flamethrower turret. So if I go to passenger seats and I've poured the left one, you can see here we've got kind of pretty good full range. And I did put some you do need flamethrower ammo, so I did load it up. And you see it does, I think it does pretty far. I mean, obviously it's a flamethrower, so it's not going to go too terribly. And then just showing the other one, which is just the right flamethrower turret. So each one of these can be used separately by a passenger. But alternatively, if you're like me and you don't have any friends, if you mount and you press space, you're able to control the turrets. If you left click, that's the left turret, and then if you right click, that's the right turret, and you are able to use them both at the same time, which is great. So if we hit spacebar again to go back out, let's see if we can find something to harass. So let's get a couple stacks. So we'll do 2, and then like I said, you can ignite using a flame attack. Burn them all! Is it not taking any damage? What's going on? Oh, okay, there it goes. I don't know why it was giving 0 damage numbers there. Alright, 1, 2, space, and it's so good. And that's kind of all the attacks and abilities that the Edmontonia has to offer. We'll go ahead and just end it there. I'm having way too much fun. But let's go ahead and move on over to color regions. So let's take a look at the color regions of the Edmontonia. So taking a look, the one thing I wanted to mention before we get into the color region, so I've set this Edmontonia to be entirely Dino Albino, so all the regions are set to color ID 36. You actually notice it's still kind of gray silvery, so something to keep in mind as you're mutating is that you're not going to be able to get that kind of gray color out. Okay, next up we've set color region 0 to be color ID 1, which is a red. You'll notice that it seems to be these belly stripes as well as some of the stripes on the legs. Yep, and you can see it a little bit better here, so you can see it really is just the underbelly part as well as some of the striping on the side. So the next region it uses is color region 2, which are the spikes. So you can see the red. So you can see the tips of the spikes are all red, some of the scutes along the face and back as well. But yeah, so this is a pretty cool spot to color. The other thing I wanted to mention, so I've quickly kind of cheated and enabled the spark powder on the spikes. You can see this color you can see that region 2 also affects the color of the spark powder that comes off the spikes. So definitely something you want to keep in mind when you start mutating. All right, and the last color region is color region 4, which you can see is this body. So it's the other second half of the spikes as well as the actual armor and the skin. It looks like as well. Let me go down a little bit. Yeah, so you can see it's actually the opposite stripes of what color region 0 was. But you can see it's very darkened. So it's not quite the same shade as the other ones, especially along the back. You can see it's a lot darker with a lot more gray mixed in. So yeah, I think very cool color regions. I do hate that this gray along the back's actually not changeable, but I think we can do some pretty cool mutations, especially with the fact that the spark powder itself is affected by the color region. Alright, so what are my final thoughts on this creature? I'm going to preface this. I'll be real, I'm a Garuga simp. I don't think he's made a single miss, and personally for me, Edmontonia is another knockout of the ballpark. All the explosions from the powder stacks and the dust clouds all feel really good and really fun. And even without the explosion, it's just got an insane amount of utility due to the fact it harvests charcoal, it harvests spark powder. It's a vast improvement over the Anki. I would even consider this almost an Anki TLC if it wasn't for all the explosions. So the other thing I like about Edmontonia is all the abilities and the attacks all feel very cohesive. You apply the powder stacks, you ignite it with another attack, you collect spark powder for the stuff. And I mean, the actual amount of attacks and abilities it has don't feel very overwhelmed. A lot of the mods that have been coming out recently all have like these crazy sets of abilities and attacks, and there's like constantly have to check the controls on the side or the cooldowns, and it's just like it can be overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me, but I also feel like it can be overwhelming for other people as well when these creatures have all this stuff to do. So Edmontonia, I think, is a pretty good, I don't want to say simple, but it's easy to use. Like I said, the abilities are all cohesive. So with that said, I will probably absolutely be adding this mod into my standard set of mods for future playthroughs. I see no reason not to include this. Only reason I wouldn't is just to avoid any kind of creature bloat, but even then, would be hard pressed to find a reason not to include this one. So yeah, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.